Great. Hello, my name's Eldon Scott, and I'd like to open the December 3rd, 2020 Southampton Village Planning Commission meeting. So hello, everyone, and welcome. This is my first meeting that I'm chairing, so I'm very excited. And we also have two new members. So I thought I'd just quickly introduce, I know Pam was on the last meeting as well, but we have two members.
That makes me a whole month old.
Month old, this is great. So Pam Gilmartin has joined the commission, so we welcome her. And also Mike Lieberman has joined, and you can see him in the middle there. So welcome.
Hello.
Pam, can I ask, are you no longer on the other commission?
That's correct.
Correct, so you
I'm no
switched. Okay,
longer on the planning board, no.
very nice, thank you.
Great. So I thought what we could do today was I want to sort of set this up for, get our planning in place for 2021. And specifically, I thought I know in last year we set up some subcommittees. I don't want to actually appoint subcommittees today, but I thought we might discuss what all the right subcommittees were, and by our next session, let's make sure that we've got someone slotted in for each of those groups. Some of them may not change. I know historically Laura was working on affordable housing and so on and so forth. But my first agenda item was really to take a look at as an agenda item, I guess it could be a subcommittee item, is to look at our master plan work that we've done historically. We have one plan that's, 15 years old now. We've done several other, I guess addendum plans. We've done the Village Business Center work that's maybe 5 years old now. We've did the residential zoning work with Studio AB 2 or 3 years ago. So I thought that would be one really useful committee, is to look at the work we've done and maybe identify where we might need to update, whether we need something more comprehensive in terms of looking at all of that work and defining the scope. Because I just know from historically, the trustees are rightfully don't want to spend unnecessary money on consultants. So my thought was maybe as a fresh commission, just to look at the materials that we have and see where we might need some professional assistance in updating any of that material. So that was sort of the first potential subcommittee item. I thought what we could discuss, well, first of all, any thoughts on that one item before I move on? Does that make sense to people?
Yeah.
Okay. How old is the last BFJ comprehensive plan?
Eduardo, you might have a sense. Was that like 14 years old or something?
I think it's more than
I
that.
think it's like
Maybe more.
I think it's like 2000.
Yeah.
I think it's 20
It was
years old.
before I was on the commission for sure.
Right.
I'm not even sure there was a planning
Yeah,
commission.
well, there was no planning commission. It was before I came on.
Yeah.
So I came on in 2004, 2005. So it predates
Yeah,
2000.
Yeah, it's
Right. I know that Frank Fish had spoken to the trustees a few sessions ago, and I just thought the most useful thing for us to do is just to look at what we really need, so
Right.
we don't start writing unnecessary scopes. And certainly things have changed in 14 years, so we
Right.
should just look at it more carefully and see
Right.
if the core information is there and what might need to be added.
And Eldon, it might be helpful for you to ask Chris from the building department to come talk to the commission about how he thinks the zoning's been working and what issues he's seeing. Because obviously we made a lot of changes in the last few years, and not sure we know if it's working well or not. So
yeah, no, it's a great idea. Actually, I spoke to him yesterday, and I think it'd be great to maybe invite him to our January session and give him some time to think through what he's seen over the last year or two in applications and where
Right.
there are specific problems that he's,
Yeah, right.
you know,
I
good
mean,
idea.
the one item I would like to add maybe that would be that for us to review also the process at the building department, you know, upgrading the forms, upgrading the transparency, being able to look at the applications online and things like this. I think that, you know, the village is really not quite up to speed with the technology that that's
Yeah, and
available
that's something we
for
should
various building
talk
departments.
with Chris about since it's his department, but I think we could maybe be helpful and if he needs resources or thoughts or help, that'd be great. So maybe that's another piece to discuss with him. I was thinking that could in fact be one of our subcommittees to look at, which not just building department, but we've discussed over the years
The process.
the coordination between boards, which we know
Yes.
sometimes is imperfect. And I know when I spoke to yesterday that there was going to, you know, they want to continue the a session once in a while for the board chairs to get together just to discuss.
But
what's
to
in
be
the-
right, the idea would be to be able to apply online, have all the applications online, have you know, you upload your plans, you upload, you know, the information, all the materials, such that it's a lot more electronic.
I don't know how expensive or difficult that sort of system is to put in place. I have no idea, but certainly, maybe that's a good question. A good question for Chris to see how much we can improve that process.
Right.
All right, so that was one, you know, so one of these kind of committees would be, I think, just looking at the existing materials that we have and seeing if there's any need or room for update. I'm just going to list the other ones that I've thought of, and then I wanted to open to the floor and see if we're missing something, and we could develop and think about this over the next month, and then in January decide who might be helping with some of the different subcommittees. So clearly, one of them, which we've had historically, is affordable housing, and I understand that the trustees have been discussing some potential legislation around affordable housing. So I think it's timely that you know, we support that and look carefully at that legislation and see how that might help and how it could be managed. I guess
What
it's
kind of-
go ahead.
What kind of form would legislation take for affordable housing?
I guess it's zoning change that would allow, I understand, I don't know it very in much detail. Hey, Laura's here, actually, that's great.
Yes.
Maybe she knows more, but hi, Laura, can you hear us?
Hi.
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 In fact, we just started, we were reviewing what sort of subcommittee work we might do for 2021. And the first one, just to review, was to look at the existing master plan documents and see if there's any work that needs to be done going forward in 21. The second one that came up was affordable housing, and I know that there was a discussion around allowing accessory apartments with certain conditions. I don't know, I haven't read it, so I don't know. I think it's very similar to the town laws, I believe, but I'm not sure. Or so that, Laura, do you know much about that zoning change? Can't hear me, maybe. Can you hear us? So
Can you
I know
hear
one of
us?
the came up was how, you know, how would that be managed? Who would be in the pool to be viable to get such an apartment? I think there was a talk on there being a cap on how many could be created. So look, I think that's, you know, it's great that we're trying to create some affordability, and I think we just have to, you know,
Yes.
be thoughtful as to how that's going to work.
But then
You know what my thoughts is on that? That if you create these secondary homes on the lots and whatnot, people will probably just hold off and rent them in the summertime to make the most money. I don't think you're gonna get affordable housing out of that.
But that's, yeah, and if we can't regulate that, then
Yeah.
it shouldn't be done, right? So we have to make sure it can be managed correctly.
Yes, and it would go in tandem with maybe a rental permit because we don't have any rental permits right
Right,
now.
right.
And in
Well, I
order to
believe-
control it, you need to have a rental permit procedure.
Right, and I don't know whether we can use existing list of people who qualify for affordable housing without having to create one ourselves. So these are the questions, but you're right, I think that no one wants to just create A or B and B units. It's not the goal.
Right. I don't know. I would be more in favor of us finding a formula whereby, for example, anybody who does a new development, we would collect a fee that would then be given to either the Long Island Housing Partnership or other entities, even the Town Housing Authority or the town. That would help financially to be able in the creation of affordable housing.
Right. I guess two thoughts. One is, I think one of the issues that came up, I was watching the trustee meeting where they talked about it, was there have been, I guess, some people have talked to the trustees about would like to create an accessory unit because they want to stay in their home but need more income. So that's only one thing. And just secondly, and for those of us who have been around probably far too long, when I first came to Southampton Village, Elm Street was lined with rental units. Like virtually every house on Elm Street had a rental unit because they're big houses, often with big garages. So they easily had to be 100 rental units in that neighborhood when I first came to Southampton. I don't think there's any left. So the idea of rental units is not new. They disappeared, but one of the differences about the town then is, everybody I knew who was working in the village and, not making a lot of money, they were all living in those rental units. So I think you're right, Eduardo. The question is, how do you regulate? How do you avoid it becoming Airbnb? I don't know what other villages or towns are doing, but it is probably, it's less expensive than trying to build housing, which is also very hard in Southampton, given the cost
of the land, right?
Yeah.
So I think that if we're able to provide a vehicle to help other organizations that develop affordable housing, like they did recently at a very nice project in East Hampton, right by the church there. And,
Yeah.
they did a very nice project.
Well, I think obviously it's an important subcommittee for us to keep looking at that legislation. So what I'll do is I'll try to get a hold of if there's any draft available yet, and I can circulate that.
Okay.
And then maybe what we'll do going forward is we could focus on one or two major issues and have a more in-depth conversation. But I think it'd be useful to get the actual suggested language so we can react to that.
Nancy McGann was trying really hard to get apartments,
Mhm.
especially on Main Street, above the stores and stuff,
Right.
Yeah,
for people who worked in the village and couldn't afford to live there.
yeah.
Right.
Well, that's sort of,
I've done some work with this
Mhm.
and talked to Diana Ware at the town and attended some of the auctions. And I think that, Mark, if there are projects where we could ask a builder to set aside at least funds to fund what is already existing in the village, which is a workforce fund, to have money so that when and if the sewers are ever enacted and we are able to have apartments in the downtown, in the village center, that there would be funds available to speak to what Pam Gilmartin just talked about, which is to have the ability for workforce housing and have funds to, you know, either grants or whatever for landlords to do their apartments, to do those kinds of apartments. I think we run into trouble when we call it affordable housing. It gets everybody's shackles up, and they all think it's Section 8, and they get all upset. So let's call it workforce housing. And there is a provision in the village code for a workforce housing fund. And let's try to work on funding it.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very good point that Laura is bringing up, that, you know, either if we speak about affordable housing, like Section 8 or like a federal program based on income, it's a different animal than trying to create actually workforce housing for local workers. You know, it's true that I think that subcommittee should definitely analyze that.
So this is I apologize.
Go ahead.
Well, this is my first meeting, and obviously I don't know the format, but I do have some general questions, and one being, are we diving into the nitty gritty of affordable housing now, or are we going through the, I guess, a list of subcommittees that you're contemplating for 2021?
You know, I think
Good
my goal
question.
is to go through the list. Today I was indulging people's general comments, but I think I'd like just to get through what that general list would be and ask.
I only say that because I do have a lot of thought on affordable housing. I've worked on it with the town. Obviously, a lot of you don't even know me yet, so I haven't really been introduced. But and I won't get into that now. But when the time and place comes for us to really dive into affordable housing, I'd love to put some input there.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you know, Mike has experience with the town. But he's really here in his capacity as a village resident. But it's great that he's got some solid planning background. So I think that's going to, and not just planning, but also he tells me long range planning, which is more of what we do since we're not reviewing individual, you know, parcels and development. So I think that's
like I'm paid to do what you guys are currently doing.
that's good.
Don't tell us that.
So let's then just talk about the other possible committees. Clearly, the next big one is sewer and sewer district. We can maybe circle back to that at the end because I think that there might be some updates we want to make on that. So let's circle. Also related to sewer, and my thought was to maybe make it its own thing. What is how does our zoning prepare ourselves for whatever sewer solutions might occur down the road? Because, you know, once there is a better solution for health permits, it will potentially unlock some sites, particularly in the Village Business District. So I think we did a lot of zoning work 3 years ago. So, and I think that was a great, it really set the stage. But I think that we should just look carefully and make sure we understand what, you know, might or might not happen, and just make sure that the character of the village, you know, will be, you know, continued the way I think people want to see it, through whatever happens after the sewer district. So that's
Also the parking, review the parking requirements also.
yeah, I would put that under that category. I mean,
Yes.
I gather there's still, we didn't change the parking restriction, but you can buy out of it. It's
Yes.
still pretty restrictive. I was looking at it. If you were to do, it's one spot per, I think, 180 square feet.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty hefty requirement. But you can buy out, I think is it 4,000 or 8,000 a spot? I can't remember.
Yeah, you can also use shared parking.
Mm-hmm.
So you can combine with another lot and take advantage of the spots across the two lots rather than just rely on your own lot.
Yeah.
I think that regulation should really be reviewed. It's
Yeah.
really not clear.
Yeah.
The parking requirements are really not clear.
So, you know, the things that regulate development are going to be, you know, the health permit from the county, the parking restriction, and then whatever the bulk and use restrictions are. We did pass a rule 3 years ago that required a build to line to the sidewalk, which I think contributes a lot to keeping that community character. So we don't have buildings setback, and there's some very general design guidelines in there that help with variation in roof line. But I think it's important that we just really look at what, might occur. I mean, I don't think that whatever sewer solution there is not going to happen overnight because it's a big infrastructure project. So there's some time there, but I think, the community should be just aware and be thinking about what might happen. And a lot of it could be really great and be really positive, and maybe it's an opportunity to get more housing. And what I think, I don't have all the goals of that village center plan that we did 3 years ago, but one of them was certainly creating a walkable community, and having more amenities in the village center. And it really is, it's a great village center, and I think everyone, pretty unanimously wants to keep it strong. And this, this could be an opportunity to do that, and I think we just want to make sure we get it right.
Although the business district zoning was done more than 3 years ago, it was pretty comprehensive.
Yeah.
I'm not sure you really need to tweak it. I mean, it really covered a lot of ground. I think you should be very comfortable.
I think that's part of, again, even looking at the master plan, I don't think that the trustees wanted to spend money on work and studies unnecessarily. So I think it's just looking and making sure that we're ready.
Can we examine parking meters or a parking system?
Yeah.
No parking meters.
Whatever. I mean, Eduardo, you know what I mean, right? Tickets, whatever, something.
We had Bob Gibbs came. That was like 6 years ago, 7 years ago.
That was a while ago.
He, I remember one of the interesting things he said was that that we do a really good job managing parking, certainly on the main streets, with the summer the summer security or police that comes along. So, but yeah, I remember he also said that the value of those spots near stores and how important that is to those retailers.
Some sort of paid parking system in the village center. I mean, I don't know if you read the article in the press, but East Hampton, in their planning for their sewer project, said a lot of the funding will come from their parking systems.
Yeah.
And the village is currently operating on a $1 million deficit. I mean, it's revenue, it's money, come on.
Well, that might be part of just looking at, looking at the impact of what the sewer might bring isn't just zoning, it's also are parking lots going to be resurfaced or not? Should there be new landscaping or signage around that? What are the opportunities that might occur if this capital event does occur? And one of them might be, how do we manage parking? So I think that's a big agenda item also. Then one that we already just brought up was maybe talking to the building department about the effectiveness of the 2017 residential zoning changes. We could talk to Chris about that, and maybe solicit thoughts from anyone in the community that's been dealing with the process. Coordination of boards and entitlement, Mark, that you brought up could be an interesting one. That's my list. Is there anything else, comments on those, or any other thoughts on things we might want to look at in 2021?
Elton, could you email that list to everybody so that I could review it in depth, if that's okay? Okay.
Absolutely. And why don't we could also, chat a little bit and think about it so that by the next planning commission meeting, we could maybe more formally start, set those committees up and set an agenda for them.
Yeah, well, I also wanted to mention the new chair of the ARB. I guess 2 months ago sent a letter to us asking us to look at updating the date in which houses would be reviewed by the ARB before they can be demolished.
Yeah,
I
Jeff.
remember that. Yeah, I saw that.
No, I apologize. I mean, that probably should get broken out. I mean, I was thinking under, general residential, but
Right.
we might want to look more specifically at ARB and ARB related problems that they've been facing.
Yep.
And I know, there's an important proposal to look at having, demolition applications just go through the ARB versus just
Right.
through the building department.
I mean, one more point that I don't know if it would be within our purview, but would be like to review the development of sidewalks, the transportation within the village, talk about that possible land acquisition for parks development, or also improvements that we could do to our parks. Things that are like a little bit of quality of life issues, how, review all these items.
Well, one thought there, and I don't know if this is feasible, but, clearly, again, the village doesn't want to spend lots of money where it doesn't need to. And I think a lot of people are concerned about that, but, maybe we could identify opportunities where outside funding might be available, whether it might be art or landscape or whatever.
Right. I think.
So just a thought.
So I second Mark's idea. Maybe it sounds like there's almost two ideas really kind of in there. One being obviously parks and how we can make recommendations, but perhaps streetscapes.
Yes.
When it comes to tree planting, tree removal, I've noticed throughout the village we have a lot, and I don't even want to speak yet because there's so much I need to read, review, and I also want to listen to all of you because I don't want to step on anyone's toes because you've all been doing this for far longer than I have. That being said, I'm just pouring through some of the village documents now, and I'm looking at green pavers being suggested in parking lots, and I don't know whatever came of these, but this is all streetscapes. That's walkability, whether we realize it or not. But when we're walking on the street, why do we turn back on Job's Lane rather than walk down Windmill Lane or Nugent Street? Because they're not aesthetically pleasing in comparison to Main Street. So how do we
Exactly.
A good resource for this, and I was on the committee. It was a village beautification committee that was run by Nancy McGann when she was trustee. And that committee was all about streetscapes and beautification, plantings, parks. And Nancy would be a good resource to reach out to in the work of that committee. And she was very much involved and was researching all kinds of things, trees, things around trees, so that you weren't walking in dog poop around trees. Just stuff about streetscapes and
we're also it's entwined with other aspects of other subcommittees, such as if we are taking the Agawam Pond or Agawam Lake environmental cleanup seriously, then such as these beautification strategies can be our stormwater runoff management.
Yep.
Between bioswales and berms, and so it's interesting to kind of see how these subcommittees are going to overlap, and maybe that's our role.
Yeah, but also I would add the beaches. There are access to the beaches, the parking area at the beaches. Try to make them a little, maybe bring them up one step.
So maybe this is under the broader name of and not to steal from the town, but a sustainability committee, or sustainability subcommittee, which is looking at these kind of overarching greening of the town, whether it's through beautification or stormwater management or parks. But again, I just plagiarized from the town's book.
But I think it's partially sustainability and partially kind of design standards. So
yes, and quality of life.
Because again, we're not going to suddenly change every street or anything like that. But as capital rolls out over many years, and when there's a big capital event like a sewer district, do we have design standards in place so that everyone has thought about it and they've thought about the types of planters or the size of tree pits or what signage might look like? What are we conveying as a village to help the businesses as well about the history and quality of what's happening, in the village. So I know, in the private sector, we definitely spend a lot of time working on brand books and design standards, knowing that those things don't all happen in a day. But if you've thought about those standards, when projects happen in the future, there's some guidelines.
Yeah, but
Gary-
people are using more and more bikes in the village. They're I mean, the way, for example, when you go to the beaches, some of the beaches don't even have bike racks. So it's little things like this, or also the lights at night. If you go in some of the beaches have no lights at all. Maybe we could try to bring it up a little bit.
Yeah, I think I guess to some degree, I was thinking that by looking at the master plan, we might break out a specific piece of work around, let's say, streetscape. And plantings. I don't know. I'm sure there are some standards as to what kind of trees and plants that
Gary Gobolewski, he has a list of
so we'd have to,
green stuff that he is approved and that he plants, and he has all that.
coordinate, closely and see, maybe this work has mostly been done.
Yeah, and he's very open to comments. When we redid the parking signs, he was very open to coming up with a better, more readable sign, not the sign the village had been using for the last 30 years. So, I think he's very open to these items, and to improving the design standards for the village.
Like Nancy did all of the crepe myrtles
Yeah.
around the railroad station and also behind Cinderella's.
Yep.
All that was done through the Village Beautification Committee.
Right.
Great.
So,
Another aspect that I think they just did in New York, where they did that, where you have Wi-Fi everywhere. I don't know if the village would consider trying to have something like this, where there's this Wi-Fi everywhere with Linksys that they use in the city, I think, or Link NYC.
Eldon, is it best to say then the following meeting we should have a couple of different committee ideas on the docket that we can share, or is that something that you're looking for?
Yeah, I'll send this list out as an email, and if anyone wants to give feedback or thought before that, so we could have a little structure and try to maybe make a final decision on what these are in the next session.
And we shouldn't pay too much attention to the semantics of it, whether we're calling it sustainability, community beautification, but more of what we're trying to get at. Right?
Love it. Yeah.
Okay.
I think one of the things, speaking about beautification or sustainability or whatever you want to call it, is the entrance to the village on North Sea off of Highway 39. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys ever looked at that, but it's awful.
Yeah, absolutely.
It could stand improving.
There's a lot of things we can do, especially, when we think about walkability. Walkability is a large term that encompasses biking, but, whether we're bumping out parking locations so that we can put bike lanes between them, so people feel safe. The whole idea about how we get from one point to another is who's getting there. And do we want our kids being able to access point A to point B on bikes? Yes. So it's how do we create this safe, beautiful environment? And I think that area could be interesting. It allows us to connect to the larger town.
And we could look at,
how about Cooper's Beach, the idea of a pavilion? That's only used as a
At Hattrick's Pavilion.
Right,
yes,
Hattrick's Pavilion. Right now, it's only used as a fast food
that's true
place in the summertime, and it could really be a beautiful spot for the whole village to hold events and things once COVID is gone.
Yes, but to come back, yeah, exactly. I think to come back to what Laura was mentioning about the we should coordinate with the MTA, that railroad bridge. What is the lifespan of that bridge? How long is it going to be? When do they plan to do any work there? Can they widen it? Can they, I think we should, somebody should.
Working on it a couple of years ago.
Yeah, they put all that stone on it.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, just while we're discussing that, are there any, I think these are a lot of great ideas. Are there any other kind of larger categories of things that we might want to consider in 2021 that we haven't discussed thus far.
Certainly, we could certainly think about it in the interim in the next month.
Yeah.
And if somebody has an idea,
I have a question because obviously I'm amongst it, so much institutional knowledge right now. I'm looking at the 2013, let's see the name of the document, Southampton Village Center Vision Plan.
Right.
So I see here these new proposed roads
Mhm.
stretching from Windmill Lane across the back parking lot through Shippey all the way to Main Street. Whatever
West
came,
Main Street, yeah.
Yeah.
whatever came of that, or I guess
It's a very good question. So, so that was, I think, a major initiative, really very much advocated by the former chair, Sia Max Sammy.
Yeah.
And the idea was to create, I think they were calling it Parish Lane and West Main Street, which is actually mapped but doesn't really exist. To sort of frame the parking lot. That never happened because the rebuilding of the parking lot never happened. You know, I continue to think the rebuilding and reimagining of the parking lot is probably the most significant thing you could do to improve the public environment in the
Well, it's just-
village.
you're creating an alley, and
Right.
alleys are what we love, you know, whether we realize it or
Correct.
not. That
Right.
is the thing that we love. But
They were gonna-
maybe
Build
I
a
could-
parking garage back there, Paul. Last year, wasn't that a big trustee thing? They were gonna build a parking garage back there?
And back then, we're talking about condominiums too.
It has been from time to time. You know, the studies don't show that we need more parking. The studies show we need better management, but they just don't show there's a real need for more spots.
Right.
if I could counter, Paul.
Yeah.
A parking garage gives us opportunity to eliminate parking on Main Street or Job's Lane. So
Uh-huh.
you can be more pedestrian friendly. What if you think of like Ithaca Commons, where you have
Right.
people are just walking in the middle of the road, it's cobblestone-esque. So it's a tool to help
Right.
us if that's our goal. It's a costly tool that could pay for itself in the long run.
Right.
Maybe would anyone be willing to speak with me prior to our next meeting, so I could ask some of these more basic questions and not take up time here in our commission meeting?
Well, I think the idea is I'll circulate this general email, and yeah, we can certainly talk, and if you have any other questions and updating. I mean, I will say that when we did when the structure parking came up 10 years ago, there was a lot of community opposition to it just as an idea. Because people, perception of the village is a more, I'm gonna say rural, but not a very urban place. So, that.
You want to investigate what was done with the parking garage as far as an idea and how far it went. You should probably reach out to Kimberly Allen, because she was really behind that, and they did a lot of studying, and there's something that exists.
Right.
I'd like to see that, because essentially a parking garage can be one of two things. One, the thing we see all over Manhattan and are disgusted by, or two, what we don't usually see because it's hidden behind multi-use structures
Right.
in a way in which you don't know it's there. And a great example comes to mind in I think it was in Montreal. I couldn't find the parking garage because it was lined with stores. And then I pulled into a small alley, and next thing I know, I'm in a parking garage. So there's obviously ways in which you can do it. It just has to be cost effective, and we don't also want to do what Montreal does.
I think
Come on.
like, there's a lot of concern
Montreal.
about vacancies on Main and Jobs and supporting the businesses.
Right.
So, if
Affordable housing, nice condos, townhouses right in the middle of the parking lot.
There you go.
And then you put a nice street all around it
He's not crazy.
but I
and
do think
regulated by the village.
these are the issues I kind of was thinking when I said, commercial district review. So it wasn't, I didn't mean that we're going to throw out the work we did 4 years ago in terms of that vision plan, but are there specific elements that would
Right.
need to be more specifically teased out in conjunction with a major capital event, if that were to occur? That was really my thinking. And it could relate to things like how might that parking lot be reconfigured, or other parking lots? I know we repaved one of the lots, but if this work is happening, there might be some digging up in the back of the buildings. So it becomes an opportunity.
Yeah.
So a lot of these things we talked about could go under that.
Exciting times.
Yeah, but I just know from the last time this went around that people love the village, and they don't want necessarily. I think we want to protect the businesses that are here, and also not to, treat it like a giant. I don't think people aren't ready for massive change. At least that was the studies that when we did those 10 years ago. But I think they're ready. People also want to keep the village healthy and make sure those businesses stay alive. So that's an important focus. Any other? Oh, so why don't we, Paul, go to any other
Right.
just detailed update on sewer?
Okay, I just wanted to sort of mention, so trustees are going to have a hearing on the wastewater treatment plan at their next meeting, which is the 10th. And wanted to sort of talk about sort of where we are and what we're going to present. So, I think as you all know, there's 3 reasons why the village has been working on a wastewater plan for quite a while now. First is because the county is requiring all the municipalities on the South Shore to look at these issues. They're being, they're asking now. I think we're not far away from them requiring. And in fact, basically every village in East End is in this process. West Hampton's obviously building their sewers. Sag Harbor has a sewer. East Hampton is sort of in the same process we are right now. So everyone's in the same place. Secondly, I think what was identified in that vision plan that Mike, you mentioned, was the need to broaden the economic base of the village to have it healthy. And I think that's come up even more recently. And the fact that the county health department does not allow additional wet uses in the village is a major issue. It's also a major expense for many of the existing wet uses who literally sit in the water to table, as Mark Schiffer has been telling us, and have to pump out on a regular basis. And then third, and finally, Chris Goldberg in his studies identified nitrogen loading from the business district as one of the major contributing factors to the continuing degradation of Lake Agawam. So that's why we're doing it. And the guidance we had from the trustees back at the beginning of the year was, number one, to focus on ideas that could speed implementation. And secondly, do not reinvent the wheel, to use existing reports and also coordinate with the work the Clean Water Committee has done. So where we are right now is we have a report that says, just to throw out a few the numbers, for the service area that was more or less identified 5 years ago and amended more recently, which is the area bordered by Windmill Lane and North Sea Road, Nugent Street or Jagger Lane to the north, and Hampton Road to the east, and including obviously Main Street and Job's Lane. There's currently a flow of 141,000 gallons per day in that area from the existing businesses. The phase 1 area has existing flows of 45,000 gallons a day. The H2M study, and I think a lot of us had questions about these, and then the numbers came up with a potential doubling of that flow. So you go from 141,000 gallons per day to 288,000 gallons per day. As Mr. Schiffer pointed out the last meeting, that probably reflects a density that's not really possible in Southampton. because of parking needs, because of other things, open space. But that gives you some idea of range. So what they then looked at was whether you could, in effect, split the creation of the district between a phase 1 and a phase 2. So think about that 45,000 square feet existing use in the first area, which is Main Street, Jobs Lane, Hampton Road. That's what's now being used. Even if you did a 25% factor on that, you're up to 60,000 gallons per day. The only facility that now exists in the village that could potentially handle a 60,000 square foot flow is the existing hospital treatment plant on Old Town Road. There are issues with that. Obviously, that plant is dated. It has an older technology, and probably most importantly, has a private owner. The estimate from H2M is if you use that plant and assume that you're not making significant changes to it, that the cost of doing all the piping and a pumping station and everything else is around $10 million. And that gets you a sewer that could handle those 3 streets. Then to go to phase 2, which is to build a sewer plant that would service the entire area. And Mark Schiffer had identified a site which is next to the cemetery at County Road 39 and North Sea Road, partially owned by the cemetery, partially owned, Mark, I think, by the Southampton Town Fire District. That site works from a planning point of view, we think, and from a technology point of view, certainly. And obviously, there's a potential for a plant on that site to also have some use by the town. And that has a potential budget of $19 million. So those are the numbers that we think are out there. I guess a few potential next steps. One is, first of all, to meet with the hospital and county to see if the hospital plan is really a viable option. We've been talking about it for a long time. 5 years ago, the hospital expressed some openness to it. We're obviously in a different time frame. They have ideas about what they're doing. They're in the midst of planning a new hospital. So that's first, and probably pretty critical to do because that's going to some extent, define what options you move forward. Secondly, is to move forward now on the formal process of the map and plan, since that's a several-year process under any circumstance. So really get that started, whatever we decide on plant.
What's that process, Paul? I just don't know how that works, the map and plan.
There's a legal process to set up the sewer district, which would be the entire village, and in the service area, which would be the area that we've talked about. You have to create a map, you create a plan, you have to identify costs for each user within the area, which we really haven't done yet. There's public hearings, there's some, there's, I think, an open question of whether the village can do it with or without a referendum, or whether they would want to do it with or without a referendum. But there's a process you need to go through. So West Hampton, which actually started right after we shelved our plan 5 years ago, I think it was, or 3 years ago. Eldon, you always have, Eduardo, you have a better sense of time than
I think it's more like 5 years. 5
years ago.
5 years plus.
Yeah, so they started around then, and they're obviously implementing now, to give you a sense. And then the other thing is, obviously, as Mark brought up, is really to do a much deeper dive into what the potential build out is, so we know really how big the plant would need to be. which you're required to do as part of the map and plan. Because one of the things, the constraints here is the county requires you to build not for today, but for a potential big build out. So just think about the 45,000 square feet, for example, in phase one. You can't say to the county, we're going to take care of that 45,000 square feet. 45,000 gallons
Yeah.
per day. They want to say, okay, so what could you use? That's what you have to
Yeah, what's the growth?
provide. You can see the logic from their point of view. So I think those are potential next steps. I think once we understand more about the potential use of the hospital plan, obviously there is a private group, Light Tower, which has made a proposal to the village. I think in some ways, once you decide what you're doing, you can figure out what is the most efficient implementation method. There's obviously a lot of advantages to a public-private partnership. But we first need to agree as a village what we're planning to do. Mark, we did look at, and I think they're saying maybe next week the regulations will come out. But it sounds like from the county's point of view, they're increasing the potential size of a smaller plant from 15 to 30,000 gallons. Is really meant to provide for something like a new housing project, an office park, something of the sort. It's not meant to be a new source for municipal plants. And obviously, given the current, even phase one, even under that circumstance, you'd have to build 2 plants just to service that. So
Talking about long-term planning, I mean, if that's the goal,
right.
I think we should just move to district and the plan.
We're losing you.
I'm sorry, we should, the hospital
That's
for
better.
the 45,000 gallons is not long-term. I mean, it's not.
I think I think the idea is that's like one phase, but
Right.
need several phases.
Right. And that's, I think, part of the decision the trustees have to make. Or do they want to split this into 2 parts? Do they want to go directly to the bigger plan? I mean, there's no doubt from a pure economic efficiency, doing it once is more efficient than doing it twice. But on the other hand, that's not always the way. Mike probably knows this better than anybody on this. It's not always the way planning
Especially
works.
since we're
Sometimes you have
revisiting
to
this
deal
after
with,
5 years. Yeah.
right, your most urgent issue. So
Well, Paul, how much does the map and plan process cost? How do we select the people to do that work? And it sounds like a lot of the questions we have will get resolved automatically through that. It has to be by nature resolved through that process.
right.
I
mean, I think the thought, and obviously this is going to be up to the trustees. I think the thought is because Brian Egan obviously is experienced in this field and worked with, I think, Patchogue on their map and plan, that he as village attorney would supervise that work and use a lawyer to help him on it, which I think was going to bring down the cost for the village. But I'm assuming you're going to spend probably $100,000 on the map and plan by the time you're done. And again, village is very constrained economically, so this is a major decision for the village to move ahead at this point. I think the trustees, as we talked about at the panel, the Southampton Press sponsored, Joe Shore, the publisher of the press, asked each of the trustees what the most important issue was for the village, and every single one said wastewater. So I think this is front and center for everyone, but this is a decision point where some significant investment for a village of this size has to be made going forward.
So is it fair to
So the mayor's one goal, isn't that a major goal of the mayor's as well?
Yeah.
So is the decision right now really whether to proceed with the map and plan, just as a next step?
Yep. And I think also, I think we're recommending, I think the budget committee has been recommending that, there needs to be a direct conversation with the hospital and understanding of their willingness to be involved, whether through a private entity or not, but is this something that makes sense for them? And I think also from the county's point of view, is that something they would encourage?
Right. But one of the first step in developing a map and plan is the location of the sewage treatment plant.
Right.
So that you cannot develop a map and plan unless you have secured the site for the sewage treatment plant. And then to go back to what Paul was mentioning about the smaller systems, although I agree with you that the county initially, revised their regulations to address, small residential developments or small projects, it may be also, I think we should definitely look at it as an alternative, whereby we could create one sewer district, but maybe have smaller plants, because the way we are, the way our village is set up, it could work if we had, let's say, 4 or 5 small plants. I think it's worth definitely looking at it after the regulations come out. Even though, myself, you're right, I don't really believe in it so much. I think that the central plant is much better, but I think it might be faster to implement.
Right. Well, if we, recommended the trustees to move to the map and plan phase, to Mark's point, how well defined, are we sufficiently well defined now for them to start that work?
Well, I think the one issue that would be helpful to, I think, everyone to review again is, are we satisfied that the service area is correct? Because that's really probably you start the map and plan, there's a sewer district, which is the entire village, but there's a service area, which is really what you're focusing on. There's been some thoughts you would extend it to include more of Hampton Road and other things. I think up to now, most of us have been more focused on really taking the village business district and not taking on a broader zoning and development issue in the village. But that's, I think, something that everyone should look at, because you sort of have to agree, I think, on a service area to move it to the next step.
Mm-hmm.
And I can send around again the H2M report, just if that's helpful, so everyone has it. And
did you get it revised, Mark, with your memo? Did they
revise it? Or?
No, and just to explain, when the trustees approved H2M going ahead, it was under very, very tight budget constraints at the time. And so there's no funds available right now for H2M to do any more work. So what everyone thought is we should finish this phase, report it to the trustees, note all the issues that Mark noted, and really, because now they have to decide whether they want to fund more work and move ahead.
Well, what is everyone's sense about, recommending pushing forward with the next phase of this, which would be, I guess, the map and plan?
No, I think that you can't do the map and plan unless you have a sewage treatment plant location. You gotta have a sewage treatment plant location.
Who's going to talk to the hospital?
You can check with Brian Egan.
Well, Mark, I think the map, and right now the study is recommending the site, at County Road 39 and North Sea Road as the sewer plant.
Then I think that if we were to recommend that site, I think then maybe Mike could review, because I think then that site could be used for other areas, for other service area in the future. It's a great, there's that condominium, 60-unit condominium complex being built across the street by the church, or that's being proposed, that could tie into it. I think it's there's more development potential on North Sea Road. I think, I think that's a great site. I think it's the right site. It's right next to the highway for the trucks to come in and out. You know, there is a privately owned parcel in the front that could also be acquired for it, which is 2 acres. It's a perfect location, right next to the cemetery. You couldn't ask for something any better. For a
I have
suit.
a question. You know the area of land next to 7-Eleven, is that owned by the village?
Yes,
It's CPF though, right?
yeah, but
You can't use CPF land for a sewer plant.
no, but it would be a great location for affordable housing or for workforce housing.
Well, Paul, do we need to move on this meeting, or what are our next steps?
I think the question is, are we prepared to recommend to the trustees that they go forward to the next phase of work on the map and plan? I think, you know, the way we had set it up was we were recommending the site that
Okay.
Mark had identified, but we had thought, but the report also calls for the trustees to study whether or not the hospital plan is suitable for a first phase plan. But whether or not it is, you know, that plan cannot serve the entire business district. It's not, it doesn't have the capacity, and I don't think anyone believes it's the right place for a bigger plant, particularly if people are paying $28 million for houses across the street.
Yes, exactly.
So, you know, I'm thinking that, you know, so I think under any circumstance, you're talking about eventually the plant is going to be hopefully at the site Mark is talking about. So we need to decide whether that's what we want to recommend next week to the trustees. We're being strongly urged to come forward and say what we, after having done this work for the last 9 months, what we're recommending.
Well, I never thought the hospital idea was such a great idea. First of all, because it's not going to be a municipal facility, and plus we don't know what's going to happen 3-4 years down the line there.
Yes.
And they have their own plans as well. I mean, I firmly believe that if you're going to do a municipal project, it should be municipally controlled and not belong to somebody else. So, I mean,
Yeah,
as far as I'm
completely.
concerned, the
I
hospital
agree
is
with
not
you,
an option.
Eduardo. If the Suffolk County Health Department's thing or Water Department is looking at these things because they want the plans to be considered long-term planning, then I don't think the hospital is an option at all.
Right. No, I would make the recommendation to the trustees, I think, to move forward the way Paul is suggesting, with you know, based on that property, focusing on that property, creating and moving in that direction, and then firming up all the numbers.
You're talking about County Road 39.
Yes.
Yeah,
Make
either
it a central
that
plant.
or the pods.
All the pods,
Maybe
yes.
the pods can be the first step, and then extend it to that County Road 39.
Yeah.
That's
But
also another idea.
Didn't H2M say that if you have the small pods, you can't marry them to a district?
You know, we'll see what the regulations say next week, but right now, the regulations require each of these to be a completely self-supporting system, so you can't connect one to the other.
Right.
Is it possible to suggest moving to the next phase and looking and comparing the County Road site to a decentralized system?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because we also don't control the County Road site either. I mean, that's another suggestion, but there's no guarantee that that's available.
But it is the county site, the county road. It's actually a big portion of that site is owned by the cemetery, and state regulations require that when cemeteries sell land, it has to be for a public benefit purpose. And the sewage treatment plant would be definitely a public benefit.
Yeah, but my point is, it's still a private entity that has to be.
Right.
Yeah, they will have to be assessed.
Yeah.
Come forward at some point and say that they were supportive of, you know, this sewer plan for the village. I mean, and that they were going to cooperate or whatever. Or, I mean, did I hear that, or am I crazy?
The what?
Town was very much in favor of the village pursuing this sewer plant and
Yes, that's what I
sewer
understand.
district, and that they, I don't know if they pledged help, but they were certainly said that they were all in favor, right? I mean,
I think that was Jay Jay Schneiderman in to the mayor. That's something he would be open to
okay. So
talking about. I think to say they
So
were all
that's the-
for it is probably an overstatement. There's a process, I assume, at the town, just like there is in the village. So
Well-
that piece of land is owned by the town?
it's not owned by the town as such. It's owned by the cemetery and the fire district, I believe.
Yes, and then there's a private parcel in the front.
Right.
So, I mean, it seems like
It's a work in
sure there's-
progress.
many other issues, but the two issues that come to mind to me are like just generally the overall expense and who's
Right.
bearing the cost, and
Right.
will those costs go up over time? Obviously, it's an important public policy initiative to try to clean our water system. And the second is just comparing, is this the most viable option going to be that particular site or any other combination? And I guess that's kind of what we're seem to be stuck on at these points. But it seems to me that if we at least proceed with the map and plan, it's going to bring more detailed planning review to the process. And it's going to, by its nature, flesh out those issues. I don't know if that, I guess my major question is, do those decisions or thoughts have to be really settled and understood today, or will those get settled and understood through this process?
No, I mean, I think they'll be understood over time. I know the mayor has asked the budget committee to take a look at this. And I think, part of moving forward would be for them to look at the options, whether this is a municipal bond issue or this is private utility that's been proposed or whatever. I think that's part of the next step.
So maybe those.
Obviously there's no, let me make it simple. There's no government money right now. So you're really talking about like, what is the proper way to finance this? And this may not be able to be financed for, until things get better, but there's probably 2 years of planning here anyway to get to that point.
Mhm.
I thought there was public financing.
Well,
Either
there
by the
was
federal
until COVID pushed a $14 billion budget gap through the state
I see,
budget.
so it dried
And I don't
up.
know, what is the budget gap in the county right now? I sort of lost track.
Yeah.
It's pretty large,
Too
I
big.
think. Sorry?
Too big, huh?
Yeah, too big. Bigger than a bread box, right? It's,
Okay.
it's gonna be a
Well-
tough year.
Okay, do we want to then suggest something at this point to the trustees regarding this? Are people, is the commission ready to take a,
I think to move forward, I think it's a good idea to make a recommendation to move forward with.
would it, and I'm not the engineer here, is it possible to
Wait.
recommend that we do it not knowing exactly which site or sites might be
Well,
viable sites?
It's all conjecture right now.
Yeah, it's all
No,
conjecture.
it is, right?
I mean, it may be that if it's a 2-year planning process that, at least you'll
Well-
set what the map is, the ideal sewage district map is, and you'll set more detail on the standards of flow and that work that has to happen. And it may,
I think that
let
if
me-
you, I think that if they assume that, we would take it as the assumption that there's that site on County Route 39, and the site there is really owned by a cemetery, which is a sort of a public entity, and then the fire district, which is also a public entity. I think that I think it would be reasonable to develop a map and plan based on that site, and then and as part of that map and plan, work out the exact numbers on the acquisition and what will it take to actually acquire the site, build on that site, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean,
And
one
then
thing we
whether
do
the
know,
plant, whether the plant will be a village plant, because since it's outside the village, the plant could then become also a county plant.
right. I mean, one thing we do know, because one thing that was done is, they worked with Gary Gillespie to review all the village-owned sites. there's not a village owns, there's not a site the village owns in the village that would permit a plan to be built. So it's not like we have other sites to look at. and doesn't
Yes.
Require a site, but there's nothing, the village doesn't own anything has the right characteristics to be used.
You mean zoning characteristics or just actual physical features?
Physical features,
Okay.
right, assuming you could change the zoning if you had to. But it's not like the village has a 3-acre parcel somewhere not being used, not bought with
Do we know-
CCPF funds, not parkland that it could make available.
Do we
We
know
did
how,
have a site, but they gave it to the ambulance corps.
I'm sorry, Paul, do we know how big of a lot we would require and setbacks and,
How large is the site, Mark? Do you remember?
The site over there is approximately close to 6 acres.
Yeah.
no, not the potential site, but
I
what,
think you need four
it would be
4 acres
plus.
or more.
so those are the dimensions required.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for the leaching and whatnot.
Yeah, it's really not, the plant itself is fairly small and they're getting smaller. It's everything around the plant.
So
Right.
do we have a GIS department or no?
No, we
In the
use
village,
town.
no, we use the town.
So you use it, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's funny.
Yes.
Have we
I'm
looked-
not sure the town is, we're supposed to tell you that, but we use the town.
So we've looked at all 4-acre privately owned properties that could theoretically, like we've done this, reviewed a GIS model of.
Yes, this
of
would
property.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Where can I get access to the H2M document?
I'll send it to you. I'll send it to everyone on the commission just so they have it again.
So it's
Okay.
interesting because it sounds like we're somewhat limited in our site because of the dimensions required, which kind of goes back to what Mark was saying about having multiple sites with smaller entities,
Yeah, the pods.
Right.
which it all depends on what's available. We only
Right.
need one lot with 4 acres, and that's the game plan.
Right.
It's also a long ways to pump the sewage all the way up to the highway.
Which costs money.
but it's safer.
Yeah.
It is, in case of let's say a Sandy style
Yeah. I was just gonna say
emergency,
that.
it's actually a very good location for it.
Right. As Mark has pointed out, the problem is, like, for example, the village owns the Dosha property. Even assuming you could get out of the CCPF requirements, it's in the flood zone. You can't put a
Flood
sewer
zone,
plant in the
yeah.
flood zone. So you
Can't
can't
do
really
that.
put it in the center of the village. People talked about putting it in the parking lots, but I don't think that would be approved because it's in the flood zone.
Yeah.
So you have to be outside of the flood zone. That takes away, unfortunately, a good part of the southern part of the village. You need a 4-acre site. It needs access. It needs to be serviced.
Makes me wonder where Riverhead sewer district is, or sewer facility, as well as Sag Harbor, because are they not also in flood zones?
Sag Harbor is, but it's an old one. It would never be approved now.
Got it.
West Hampton obviously is at the airport, so
Gabreski.
Where's
Yeah.
East Hampton going to put theirs? Does anybody know?
I think they're talking about putting it near the railroad tracks.
Hmm.
Are we, just as a point of, committee policy here, are we able to take any comments? I don't know if anyone's listening in the public here and would like to, I don't see any chats or anything like that.
There's no one. Oh, wait, there's one attendee. Jeff Broadleaf is in the attendees.
Okay.
Jeff.
Well, let us know. You let us know if anyone is commenting,
Right.
and we can certainly respond to those comments.
If it,
Well,
right,
I'd like to, and I think we should decide what we're doing with this. I guess, I think it makes sense to move the process forward. It sounds like there's some
Yes.
question about, ultimate locations, since we don't control that location. I think it would be interesting to look at the, options of both a centralized and a pod. You may well be right, Paul, and it may be that it's just not feasible technically, or maybe too expensive to operate multiple smaller systems. But I think it would be worth at least having them look at that, Because
Yes.
we have to select the location and
Right.
we could get knocked out on the
Right.
cemetery, we don't know. But I know there's a lot of momentum
Yeah.
to take a more careful look at this and
Right.
meet the new standards for, clean water, so.
Yeah.
Should we, would the, other commission members, be in favor of asking the trustees just to move this to the map and plan phase with the caveat that we, need to look more carefully at the locations?
Yes, I mean, to do the map
We
and
gonna
plan, you gotta
suggest-
have the location, so
Yeah,
you have the two options, either County
Yes.
Road 39 or the pods, and you can
Yes.
base it on that.
The
Exactly.
hospital is still an
yeah,
option,
okay.
but with
That's
with
fine.
its own issues.
that's
fine.
good, Eduardo. Yeah.
So
Right, so
should we do a resolution or?
Yeah, so I would, I make a motion to, pass a resolution that we suggest to the trustees, that they move to a map and plan. And the caveat that I'd like to put in is that, we leave the option open to look at several sites, because we don't know for sure which site's going to be most viable at the end of the day.
A second,
I'll say, yeah,
All right,
What several sites? What are the several sites?
it's the County Road
County Road
39.
39 or the pods.
Yeah, that's what I
Okay,
think.
that's
think
not
that's-
several.
I think
cool.
that these are the two sites.
Eduardo, I liked what you said first. It's less ambiguous.
What,
Yeah, I
what-
agree.
what language do you?
I would, yeah, the same way Eduardo was suggesting that they move ahead with the map and plan based on and include also an analysis. So either for the methods of the pods, based on the new regulations from the health department with 30,000 gallons per day units, or the location at the site, the County Route 39. Because the County Route 39, yes, the County Route 39.
Okay,
I think the cemetery will be happy to sell that site.
so we'll move ahead with the map and plan, and look at, either the pod sites or the County Road 39 sites.
Yeah, I'll second that.
I have a quick
Not
note.
either, not either. I'm sorry. We're gonna do a map and plan based on the site of, the potential site of 39, with the caveat that with the new regulations regarding pods, that will also be considered.
All right.
Okay,
Okay, that's fair.
fine by me.
That's
Second
fine.
to that?
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Okay, great.
Okay, so I'll write that up, and make sure, maybe Paul, I'll make sure I get the language right and check that with you.
Eldon, did
Yeah.
we ever consider possibly the backside of the Full Gospel Church?
I don't know, I haven't.
We
looked into it.
did.
We're looking at,
Yeah, they did look at that site. I don't know. I don't remember what the issue was, but I know they looked at that site.
aren't they planning an affordable housing place there?
Yes, they're planning an affordable housing project there.
Well, but that's discretionary upon the town, and it's a change of zone, so it might not
Yeah.
happen.
Might not happen,
Might
but
happen too.
Absolutely, but at this time, we shouldn't think in
Good
that
question.
mindset. It's a proposal that hasn't even gone through the formal application process, and as someone who's reviewing it, it may or may not happen. So
Right. Let me
I look
check,
at
but
what
I
the
think-
town.
I think that was on the list of sites that they looked at.
yes.
I don't remember why they.
No, because there is this
But I think it
other,
was on the list.
yeah, but there's this, it's a lot of residential development right next to it.
The rehab.
Right, there's the rehab on center, but on the other side, you have the fairly large homes there.
Well, I think we passed that
Yes.
resolution. I just wanted to, as a final matter, are there any other
Oh.
topics?
Well, as far as our purposes, we can say this site, and if they come up with a better site, the
Right.
trustees, then they'll consider that one.
Yeah. So let's, I just want to see if there's any other,
Could I get a motion for approving last month's minutes? Is that possible?
I motion to approve last month's minutes.
Seconded.
Second.
Second,
That's it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Great.
All right. Any other business that anyone would like to bring up for today's meeting?
No,
Eldon, if you'll send your committee list and also the wording for the resolution we just passed.
Yeah.
right.
I'll
The,
send
the
those.
other thing is that whether, as a village, whether we should, and I'm just throwing out this right now, whether, given this pandemic and what's going to happen in the next few months, whether some regulations or enforcement action should be taken by the village to make sure that all the citizens are protected, that there is, because I don't think there's any enforcement being done right now.
I don't think you really need enforcement.
I think that's something for the mayor's office to
To do.
deal with,
Taking care of that quite a bit.
and the police department.
I have to go.
Okay.
Are we done, Eldon?
Yeah, I think we're done.
All right. So I guess I move to adjourn the meeting.
Okay.
I'll second it.
All
Okay.
right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you very much. I'm glad we had
All in
my
favor?
first meeting.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.